Dr. Alan Patterson was known for his precision and dedication. He had built a reputation as one of the best surgeons in the hospital, but there was something beneath his professional exterior that many didn't see. His biases, carefully concealed under a mask of professionalism, rarely surfaced until one day they did. It was a busy Monday afternoon when the emergency room doors swung open and a young black man was rushed in on a stretcher. His name was Jamal, a 25-year-old who had been in a severe car accident. He was barely conscious, bleeding heavily, and in need of immediate surgery. Dr. Patterson was on call, but as soon as he saw Jamal, something inside him hesitated. He glanced at the patient's chart, then back at the nurses who were waiting for his instructions. Without saying a word, he turned to his colleague, Dr. Emily Thompson, and muttered, "Can you take this one?" Dr. Thompson, taken aback, nodded, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the underlying tone in his voice. "Of course," she said, trying to hide her disapproval. As Dr. Patterson walked away, he convinced himself that he was simply too busy, that he had other patients to attend to. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had let his prejudice cloud his judgment. Dr. Thompson and her team worked tirelessly on Jamal, managing to stabilize him after hours of intricate surgery. As she watched over him in the recovery room, she couldn't shake the anger she felt toward Dr. Patterson. The next morning, the hospital director called Dr. Patterson into his office. There had been a complaint. Word had gotten around about his refusal to treat Jamal. The director, a stern but fair man, looked at Dr. Patterson with disappointment. "Alan," he began, "I don't need to tell you that what you did yesterday was unacceptable. We are here to save lives, all lives, regardless of who they are." Dr. Patterson, his face flushed with shame, tried to justify his actions, but the director cut him off. "You need to reflect on your actions, and I suggest you start by talking to Jamal. He's awake now and asking for the doctor who saved him." Dr. Patterson's heart sank. The thought of facing the man he had turned away filled him with dread, but he knew he had no choice. He walked down the hallway to Jamal's room, his steps heavy with guilt. When he entered, Jamal looked up at him, his eyes still groggy from the painkillers but filled with warmth. "Doctor," Jamal said weakly, "thank you for saving my life." Dr. Patterson felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to correct him, to tell him it wasn't him who saved him but Dr. Thompson, but instead he simply nodded, unable to speak. Jamal continued, "I don't remember much from the accident, but I remember praying that someone would help me, and you did." Dr. Patterson felt a wave of shame wash over him. Here was a man who was grateful, who held no resentment despite not knowing the truth. Finally, Dr. Patterson found his voice. "Jamal, I'm sorry. I wasn't the one who operated on you. I made a mistake, and I let you down." Jamal's expression softened. "We all make mistakes, doctor. What matters is that you're here now." Dr. Patterson left the room, his mind in turmoil. He had always prided himself on being a good doctor, but he realized now that being a good doctor wasn't just about skill or knowledge. It was about compassion, about treating every patient with the respect and care they deserved. From that day forward, Dr. Patterson made a vow to himself to confront and overcome his biases. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to be better, to be the kind of doctor that Jamal believed him to be. As Dr. Patterson walked out of Jamal's room, he felt a deep sense of discomfort, a gnawing in his conscience that wouldn't go away. He knew he had to make amends, not just to Jamal, but to himself, to become the doctor he had always claimed to be. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Patterson began attending workshops and seminars on racial bias and cultural competency. At first, he was hesitant, feeling exposed and vulnerable as he confronted his own prejudices. But as he listened to the stories of others, patients who had been mistreated, colleagues who had experienced discrimination, he began to understand the impact of his actions. He started to change the way he interacted with his patients, making a conscious effort to connect with them on a personal level. He asked more questions, listened more intently, and showed more empathy. It was a slow process, but each small step felt like a victory. One day, a few months after the incident, Dr. Patterson was called to the emergency room for another critical case. A young woman, also black, had been in a severe accident and needed immediate surgery. Dr. Patterson felt a familiar twinge of hesitation, but this time he didn't let it stop him. He took a deep breath, gathered his team, and began the procedure with a newfound sense of purpose. The surgery was a success, and as Dr. Patterson spoke to the woman's family afterward, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. They thanked him profusely, and for the first time, he felt he had truly earned their gratitude. News of Dr. Patterson's transformation began to spread throughout the hospital. His colleagues noticed the change in him, and patients began to request him by name. He wasn't just the skilled surgeon anymore. He was the compassionate doctor who cared for everyone equally. One day, Dr. Thompson approached him in the hallway. She had been watching his progress with a mix of skepticism and hope, and now she saw the genuine change in him. "Alan," she said, smiling, "I see you've found your way back." Dr. Patterson nodded, a slight smile on his lips. "I still have a long way to go, but I'm getting there." She patted his shoulder. "That's all we can do. Keep moving forward." A few weeks later, Jamal returned to the hospital for a follow-up visit. His recovery had been remarkable, and he was eager to thank the doctors who had saved his life. When he saw Dr. Patterson, he walked up to him and extended his hand. "I heard about everything you've been doing," Jamal said, shaking Dr. Patterson's hand firmly. "Thank you for everything." Dr. Patterson felt a surge of emotion. "No, Jamal, thank you. You taught me more than I could ever teach you." As they parted ways, Dr. Patterson knew that his journey was far from over, but he also knew that he was on the right path, one that would lead him to become not just a better doctor, but a better person. And so Dr. Patterson continued to learn, to grow, and to challenge the biases within himself, knowing that the most important lessons often come from the most unexpected places. In the months that followed, Dr. Patterson's transformation became evident not just in his interactions with patients, but also in his relationships with his colleagues. He became a mentor to younger doctors, sharing his experiences and encouraging them to reflect on their own biases. He knew that changing the culture of an entire hospital was a monumental task, but he believed that if he could change, others could too. One day, the hospital received a prestigious award for excellence in patient care. It was an acknowledgement of the collective effort of the staff. But Dr. Patterson was singled out for his role in leading the change. At the award ceremony, he was asked to give a speech. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of his colleagues, he felt a mix of pride and humility. He took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for this incredible honor," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "I stand here today not because of what I have done, but because of what I have learned. I used to think that being a good doctor was about skill and knowledge, but I've come to realize that it's also about compassion, understanding, and the willingness to change." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I made a mistake, a big one. I allowed my own biases to affect my judgment, and it nearly cost a life. But I was given a second chance, a chance to learn and grow, and for that, I am deeply grateful." The room was silent, the audience hanging on his every word. Prejudice is something that can live quietly within us, unnoticed and unchecked. It's not enough to be neutral. We have to actively work against it to be better, to do better. I stand here today not as a man who has overcome his flaws, but as someone who is committed to the ongoing process of becoming better, for myself and for my patients. He looked at the audience, who nodded in agreement. Think, be honest, and face the truth. It's not easy, but it's important. Together, we can treat every patient with dignity and respect. The room applauded as he finished. Dr. Patterson left the podium feeling at peace. After the ceremony, Jamal came up to him, smiling. "That was amazing, Dr. Patterson. You've come a long way." Dr. Patterson smiled, grateful. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jamal. You made this happen, and I'm grateful." Jamal nodded, respect passing between them. "We're all in this together. Keep doing what you're doing." Dr. Patterson knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready. He learned that the most important battles weren't always fought in the operating room. They were fought within oneself, in the decisions made every day, in the commitment to being better. He kept working, not just as a doctor, but as a leader, mentor, and man determined to leave a legacy of compassion and equality in the place he had once taken for granted. His journey began with a mistake, but it led to a lasting change. Dr. Patterson knew that a person's true measure wasn't in their perfection, but in their willingness to grow and make a difference. That was a lesson he would always remember.